1 second, guys. Just making sure everything is good. One second. Great. Great. Everything's set. Okay, welcome to the Zeall Show. This is episode 49. Wow, at 49 already. It's my 49th episode here. The next one, which will be on Thursday, will be my 50th, and I hope definitely to have more people here as well. So welcome to the Zeall Show, where the show is unscripted, uncensored, and anything that I basically will be saying is all live streamed to everyone on this channel. Oh, thank you, TikTok. Forgot. Yes, now TikTok can hear. Great. So yes, I have a very, very filled event today. We have the partnership with the DeFi Governance Radio, Kat. I'll bring her on in just a bit, but just want to send a few messages to you guys first. First is we now have the the Zeall Show calendar. You just go to Luma, so lu.ma/the Zeall Show. You will see there the different events that I have. So we'll have one with Loretta Joseph, who helps write the policies for the different African countries, including the Commonwealth, and also working very closely with the stablecoins policy team in the US as well. And I'm also on the Commonwealth policy writing with them as well. She'll be there on Thursday, and a number of shows will be there. Okay, so go to that particular link. Okay, I have it here on my events calendar. I also have the Zeall Show community on X. If you're on X, please do join that. And I also have the Zeall Show weekly newsletter where I will summarize my thoughts and also all the different people that went on my show, the learnings and so on, and what we've talked about. Okay, so that's it. Let's go to the main show. Now let me just switch it over to the main one. Give me a second. This one. And they all should be here. And I need to switch it over. Not this feed, sorry. There's a lot of shows. Just 1 second, 1 second. There's a lot here. This one, correct. Okay, let me just switch it over to this one. Great, hi. Let me turn on the sound. Okay. See, this is the woes of only doing one-man show with AI helping, but still all have to do it by myself. Great, thanks. Hey, hi, Kat, and hi, Rafael. How are you?
Good,
Hi
good.
there.
Great. I'm very honored to have you guys on the show. And always, as usual, every month I will work with Catherine on a DeFi governance radio segment. And this week we are working with Kat to talk more about on the DAOs with Rafael. So, Kat, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks, Anson, for putting this show together. DeFi Governance Radio started as a monthly segment in January this year to feature top thought leaders in the decentralized governance space and really to help grow a governance community out here in APAC. So I'm very glad that Rafael's taken the time to speak to us because he's from StableLab, the governance lead at StableLab, and which leads the top 25, contributes to the top 25 DAOs in Web3. So I'm talking too much. So Rafael, please take it away.
Hi. Hi, everybody. My name is Rafael Spanocchi. I'm the governance lead at StableLab. StableLab is a governance services and analytics company. So basically, we have two lines of business. One is like providing services and consulting to DAOs and for like governance aspects of governance or governance design. And the other is an analytics part where we use data, on-chain and off-chain data, to analyze the effect and the cost of governance decisions. So basically making sure that governance decisions have a high ROI and backing that up with data.
Nice. Interesting. So yeah, like for the past few weeks, every single time when I work with Kat, I learn something on the show. And then obviously after that particular two segments, I have more questions that come up. Okay, so now the question that I have is about delegation on DAOs. As to give you more context, DAOs have been growing a lot, or the DeFi has been growing a lot, but the delegation has also been growing as well. And then, but the thing is, when you in the DeFi space, when you delegate, you're basically making that particular node per se more centralized because he's doing it for you, and it's more convenient. But in terms of how delegation works right now in DAO, are there any trends? Is it growing? What's it like in terms of delegation?
Yeah. So I think like the concept of delegation is not new to DAOs. It's basically what we practice in most democracies, is that people delegate actually delegate their voting rights for a certain period of time to other persons who can represent their interests in governance or in governments. I think that makes sense basically because, like, for instance, if I look at what I'm from Germany, what the German parliament discusses, like a lot of these discussions are like I would have nothing to say there. And like delegating my voting power to a party to represent my interests is, at least in theory, sound. I think, like, of course, when we talk about modern democracies, we already see that there are a lot of like edge cases and second order effects that need to be considered because it's obviously not always working as it should be, right? Like it seems that then what happens is that these delegates kind of get a life of their own and start to care more about their own interests versus mine. But I think that's probably getting ahead too much. I just think in DAOs, the very same thing was the case. I think one of the first major DAOs that introduced delegation was MakerDAO. And the reason they did so is that they had consistently had issues meeting quorum. Now, quorum is the amount of votes that need to be cast for a decision to become effective. And if the quorum isn't met, then basically the governance contract says, well, not enough people agreed, so I'm not going to execute it, which I think is really good because this is the amount of quorum is like the basic measure of governance security, right? Like you can imagine, especially in DAOs where you can buy votes, that a low quorum means that the amount of money that is necessary to buy enough votes to affect a decision. And the decision could mean I want to like transfer all the assets that a DAO has to my wallet. As high as the quorum is, that's the cost that is needed to, the minimum cost that is needed to affect such a decision. So high quorum is good. On the other hand, high quorum can only be reliably passed if you have high participation. This is where MakerDAO struggled. And like they had to redo votes 2 times, 3 times, 4 times even until they passed. And this slowed the whole execution of the DAO down tremendously. And so they thought, hey, what can we do? And they introduced delegation to allow token holders to say, hey, here are these like 5 or 10 very active community members. I'm going to delegate my vote to them because they will watch out when there is a vote and go and cast their vote. And then I don't have to check every time, right? This worked for a little while, and then delegates kind of didn't vote as much as before because delegation at that time was unpaid. And as you can imagine, like if you don't pay people to do something, then they will do it whenever they find time to do it. And then if there are other priorities like their day job, like their families, like whatever gets in the way, then they'll say like, well, this is an unpaid role. I love the community, but like I really got to take care of my kids, or I'm on this, journey or on this travel for my boss. So I can't vote no, sorry.
So this is what I want to ask. So for the different delegators right there out there, I totally understand democracies. There's a representative for you, and it's supposed to be helps the ones that have delegated, I am representing them in terms of the interests. But do these delegators have different governance within them, or there's a sort of handbook that the DAO has given them and they just sort of follow?
Sorry, Anson, you mean delegates, right?
Delegates,
'Cause the
sorry, yes.
delegates are the token holders. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so how it works is that basically delegates want to attract delegators, because the more votes you get delegated, the more power you have. And usually, or especially in MakerDAO, then when they introduced delegate compensation, it was tied to amount of voting power you have. And to do that, they would publish on the forum a thread, a so-called delegate profile, where they lay out how they think about the DAO and how they will approach different subjects. So they'll give like a little manifesto, if you want. And then every week, when they voted, they would publish their voting and the rationale behind their decisions on the forum. And so if I would delegate to another person, I could check up on his voting activity and also on his basic direction that he or she wants to take. And this would allow me to either, like, for instance, if then the person does something that I don't agree with, then I can revoke my delegation basically instantly, which I think is also very different. In Maker, it was even more so. I could withdraw the delegation during a vote, which I think is very special. And that means this is how basically delegates differentiate themselves, and how delegators, so the people who delegate, can think about or can inform themselves about like who they want to delegate to.
Speaking about the delegate profiles, right, Rafael, you wrote this really good piece on voting intent where you broke down the three main archetypes of delegates, eagles and piranhas and wolves. Could you share a little bit about how you think about these archetypes? Because I think that really gives a lot of good context around how delegates actually end up voting and creating rationales for specific proposals.
Yeah, totally. So I think my piece there, but yeah, thanks for mentioning it. I think that's really interesting, because I like, that's something that I haven't seen a lot. Is like, basically at the moment, DAOs still look for this kind of one size fits all solution. And like my piece kind of, like the thesis of my piece was that actually DAOs should tranche voters into different categories, because different voters bring different levels of attention and consistency to the table. And this is what I summarized as intent. So like the level of their intent is very different. And like at the bottom end, or like bottom, like I think the vast majority of token holders basically just have the token, and what they want is that the token appreciates in value. And they're probably okay to spend a little time on DAO governance if there's some kind of incentive, right? If they, like, for instance, I think the first DAO that really nailed that was Curve with the gauge voting system. And in Curve, like as a token holder, you can direct the protocol emissions to different pools of this DeFi ecosystem. And so there's like a very nice little incentive match there. Basically, when I, for instance, in the Katja Anson pool, and I want more directions to go to this pool, then I would stake my Curve there, because I'm already in that pool, and that would mean I get more emissions, right? So it's a very simple, straightforward feedback loop where the incentives really align very well. Now, this gauge voting system has been expanded to multiple avenues where it's not as straightforward, but still, I think it's a very simple system for token holders to vote. And so I think like the vast majority of token holders should not vote on like complex decisions, but should have very easy gamified ways to participate. And then there's like a middle ground of people who usually spend a lot of resources. This is what I call wolves, that spend a lot of resources on a DAO, but they are there for a reason, right? They want to either become something or pass a proposal to do something. Now, these people are extremely valuable because this is outside talent coming into the DAO. And they usually have a lot of experience from other DAOs or like have a very broad view of the field and have an interest, like a drive of their own to participate in the DAO. Of course, if their proposal doesn't make sense for the DAO, then okay, right? Like that there should be like very clear expectations of what the DAO actually wants, so these people can already self-select out, and then you'll get much less scam or grifters and more people who are actually trying to do something that the DAO actually wants, and give them a route to participate. Like these are like requests for applications, requests for participant for proposals. Very clear grants programs. I think for these people, they have a lot of drive, they have a lot of resources to bring, but they need clarity. And then on the top end, what I call eagles are like the core community members. And I think in every community, there's like 3 to 10, 12 people who really, really care for this particular DAO and for whatever reason, and they like spend day and night in the trenches, on Discord, on in the forums, replying, ideating, you know, and these people are extremely valuable, and you should give them power over time, right? Like decision, power to make proposals, include them in discussions, make sure that usually they are very aligned with the values of this ecosystem in the beginning, and they can be very powerful reminders of where actually the DAO set out to go in the beginning. And kind of trenching voters into these 3 categories, I think, is a much healthier solution, because you can really get people where they are at the moment, versus the current system where people have to decide on sometimes extremely technical stuff where you need hours and days and years of background work to fully understand the proposal, and you expect people to vote, and then people say, okay, there's low governance participation, and I am arguing this is actually a good thing. You don't want more uninformed voters, right? This is it's bad, right? It's like
It's for any election.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But actually, I think it's very similar. Like a friend of my father once had this joke that you should allow every voter to trade their voting right in a particular election for a case of wine. and, and I think, yeah, I mean, it's a joke, right? But it's also not completely wrong, right? It's like if somebody would be willing to part with their voting rights for like a very low kind of, you know, traded for like a very low value kind of commodity, then I think this tells you enough about the voter that you actually should be very thankful that they are as honest and take the case of wine instead of going and then voting for something that they probably spent 5 minutes thinking about, right?
Actually,
Yeah.
Rafael, let's jump back. I can see some of my viewers are giddy on this. Just want to understand what got you into DeFi governance, consulting with the different DAOs. Like, what was your story getting into this space?
So I actually, like, I don't know if in the history of Ethereum, there was actually what brought me to Ethereum was a project that was called the DAO. It was in 2016, like pretty shortly after Ethereum launched. And it was basically the first decentralized autonomous organization. And what they said is the DAO will collect money from people who put money into the crypto organization. And then it will use community votes to fund projects that can pitch to the DAO. And it attracted an enormous amount of money. I think like a third or a fourth of the entire market cap of Ethereum was in this DAO. Unfortunately, the smart contract contained an error and the DAO was completely hacked and all the funds were drained, which actually led to forking out Ethereum as we know it from Ethereum Classic On Ethereum Classic, all the funds are stolen. And on Ethereum proper, there were just like a couple of miners, right? At the time, it was still proof of work. And they kind of decided to approve a hard fork where the DAO kind of rolled back the blockchain to before the DAO hack happened. And then like people hadn't lost their money, right? Because there was so much money in there. It was like this really pivotal moment in the history of Ethereum, and something that still haunts them to this day, because people say like, yeah, you know, it's not a fully decentralized chain, and if something bad happens, you're just gonna roll back the chain and so on and so forth. But this was the initial DAO. I was super intrigued by the concept of a fully automated organization. And I thought this is a wonderful design space for thinking about governance. Because I think as humans, how we organize ourselves is really determining what we can do in a way. It's people are very sensitive to their place in an organization, to what's required of them in an organization. So how you organize people is very powerful. And for me, DAOs represented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rethink how we want to organize. So I actually didn't go into DAO governance straight away. I spent time as a qualitative analyst for like a Swiss family office for some time, and then did a lot of research for Cointelegraph Research. And then I found a role in a governance team for Flipside Crypto, which is a data analytics company. And I joined Flipside Crypto as a governance research lead at that time, and spent a lot of time researching and writing about governance, and then also being very active in Maker. And that led to us being like one of the top delegates in MakerDAO. And in MakerDAO, I met Tu Nam from Korea, who was also a big Maker delegate. And in the end, Flipside decided to discontinue the governance team because they thought it was not central to their operations. And then I joined StableLab because I already knew Tu, and he offered me a job, and yeah, here I am.
Nice, nice. That's great. Finally, I can also understand why, because I really can feel your passion in the governance, and people will also want to know. Okay, so going back to just then about the delegation, Kat, I think this is still my part, right? We will go to your part. So
Sure, take your time,
delegates is the right way to move forward in the DAOs. Is it, or is there a better way? Do you think we can move forward?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's highly contested at the moment. Like there's basically like two camps. Like one camp is like, hey, delegates are important. They're like really, because basically these are people who have a lot of context, and they spend a lot of time thinking about these issues. So if you pay them, like you'll get high quality delegates, and this will increase the decision-making capabilities of your DAOs. And then there are other people who say like, hey, basically with delegates, you're introducing this like managerial class, and you get like these, like professional politicians, like professional talking heads that actually don't bring any value to the table, but just make governance inefficient. And these camps are currently like duking it out on crypto Twitter mostly. My personal opinion is that I think the current voting system just is really bad. It's bad for DAOs, it's bad for communities. I think it needs to evolve. I think delegates will always have a place in DAOs. I think it will be different from where it is now. I think more top level, more like voting on values, on like maybe like top level North Star kind of direction and metrics. And then other decisions will be taken by either teams who just execute very quickly, or by stuff like gauge voting, contests, like this kind of thing that is more participatory, that kind of draws community members in and activates token holders and creates a lot of more value accrual to tokens, right? Because in the end, I think that's, if you go out and you poll 10,000 token holders what their top priority is, I think 9,990 will answer the token price. So whatever governance system you have, there should be some way how the governance system accrues value back to the token.
Interesting. Because if you think from a country perspective, we, in a way, we also think of, let's say in Singapore or even in Germany, there's also like a country token, which is the GDP, right? But we just don't see it. So that's why people don't really look at that price as much as compared to a token holder. So yeah, you're right. It's actually very, very similar. Kat, yeah, you can take over.
Yeah, I was thinking about the back to the three archetypes of voter intent, right? When you mentioned the two camps, the professional politicians, what sort of personality would they fall under? Would it be wolves? And I'm also curious to know, how do you uncover these voter personalities? Because as just sharing from a personal perspective, when I started on the delegate journey within Lido DAO, I had to have quite a bit of a hard time actually doing um, delegation discovery, because everyone's anonymous and it was kind of hard to figure out who's who. So the only reason why I even got onboarded into Lido DAO was because one of my peers is a Lido community lifeguard. So he was like what do you call this? An eagle. Yes. So selflessly serving and through the grants, I think he got a community grant as well. Yeah, and that keeps him incentivized to a certain point, but the rest of it is his own initiative. So yeah, curious to hear your point of view on this. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I think like it can be both eagles and also wolves. Like I think there are like some teams that just look like for professional delegation. I know that we personally also do that. Like I think we bring a lot of resources. So I think like the ROI of for DAOs is pretty good. But also like I have to be honest, like we have to run a business and like we can't do unpaid work for long. So that would be actually like more of a wolf role, right? And then you have like some DAOs where we are just like for instance, Lido, like we've been active in Lido forever now without ever getting, like, I think we got paid once for a small research grant. But it's just like something that is, I think we're super aligned with, so we spent some time there, and I think there's also tremendous opportunity in that DAO. But I think most delegates have some kind of motive, and I think this brings me back to the subject of delegate compensation. If you don't pay people to be a delegate, the only way, like maybe you find the odd person that is really like somehow super passionate about the DAO and just feels super integrated into this community and does it out of the good of his heart. But I think most people have some kind of motive. Like,
yes,
for instance, L2Beat are a very, I think, amazing and big delegate in a lot of DAOs. But that's also how they become public enough to get enough grants to fund their operations. I think their operations, like, this is not a bad thing, right? Like L2Beat is super valuable for the space. L2Beat, like for those that don't know it, is a website that grades different level 2 ecosystems by like how secure they are, how decentralized they are, and how far they are in their journey. So if you are interested into L2 blockchains, Ethereum L2s, then I think going to L2Beat to check is definitely a really good move. And they, like, nobody's paying for that service, right? Which is good, right? Like if you would have these L2 blockchains directly paying L2B, then you would have a massive conflict of interest. That's basically what happens with rating agencies, right? They get paid by the companies they need to rate, and then you're in these very murky waters. And L2Beat kind of got around these conflict of interest by saying, we will not accept money from these L2 blockchains, but we will get paid by these like public goods funding or by delegate compensation. And since they are very big delegates in a lot of DAOs, they get a lot of delegate compensation, and this allows them to support their team, which I think is awesome. But like I said, like they are there. It's very good that they are there, but ultimately you know, they are there because they have a product, right?
Mm.
And so I think if you don't pay delegates directly, then you're paying indirectly. So it's either or you have people just like going through, right? Like participating for a while and then dropping off, because like I think in the end, it's unreasonable to expect that people put in so much of their time for free. I think that's
Yeah, it's not
completely
sustainable at
unrealistic.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree on this. Yeah. Um, that's which is why like I think it's important, yes, to have the right motivations, but at the same time, how do you keep operations sustainable? I think that's front and center of the growing discourse in the delegate space. And I totally agree with you. It's hard to like it's hard to motivate someone to be really like full-time on the role unless you pay them properly. Yeah, agreed 100% on this as well. Anson, you have any thoughts on yeah.
Yeah, I am thinking through because I am still very intrigued by at the beginning when Rafael compared the DAO with the countries, right? So yes, the concept is the same. The delegators want to give their power to the delegates. But unlike a country where you have a leader to actually, pull things forward, a DAO is supposed to be only maybe by a vision. It doesn't really have a leader. That how is the incentive there going to get all the delegates to really like contribute and do well for that DAO? How does the incentive structure work there instead of just
Yeah.
tokens, of course?
That's I think that's like the million-dollar question at the moment in some ways. So very insightful, I think. Like that's what a lot of DAOs really struggle with. I think Lido not, right? Like for Lido, it's super clear. Like the core team and just said like they are this amazing staking infrastructure for Ethereum. And I think that's a very clear goal. So they evolve along with Ethereum. But for a lot of other DAOs, it's not as clear. And you're absolutely right. There's no leader to set this kind of North Star, to really set these like top level goals. And it should, in a decentralized organization, it should actually come from some kind of deliberation process that all of the community participates in, right? And we're seeing very little of that, actually. Like, you would expect that all of these DAOs would have like competitions or like some kind of sense making sessions or vote, like some kind of voting that is very not as plutocratic as typical voting, but more inclusionary about like, hey, where should we actually go? Like maybe choose like 5, 6, 10 top level goals and then have the community vote on like where their preferences are. But we're not really seeing that. And I think this is creating a lot of problems because then what we talked about before, teams just come in and say like, oh, I think this is a good idea. And usually it's a good idea, but a good idea at not a good place can also be a bad idea, right? So actually you want the kind of good ideas that support the overall goal. And if you don't have an overall goal, then you have like, multiple horses pulling in all of the different directions. And I think we've seen it, for instance, with Arbitrum last cycle, like a year ago or so, where they had this massive proposal for a 250 million token gaming fund. And you thought like, why? Right? Like, of course, gaming was a super hot narrative at the time, but there was almost no gaming on Arbitrum. They were big in DeFi, they still are. They're huge in real world assets. They're a great chain. They have lots of like L3 chains that are very active. Why would you use that much money to create games when there's like not a single big blockchain game on Arbitrum at the moment? So it's very strange, but it passed because there was a lot of narrative. The proposal was well written, and in the heat of the moment, like voters coming in thought like, hey, yeah, games is the hot thing. Everybody's got to have games. Okay, let's pass this proposal. Now these funds are being clawed back because like actually there was not a lot of delivery. But in the meantime, like they spent a lot of time on like setting up the structure. It was like an investment structure. They paid a lot of legal fees. And like this is in some ways, it's like sunk costs, right? So if the DAO would have put in much more time into getting clear on what it actually is and what it wants, then I think this wouldn't have happened. And now actually also the foundation is taking a more central role in how the DAO is run and will set these priorities. And I think that's fine. I just hope that over time, as DAOs decentralize, they find processes. And I think that's something that I'm so passionate about. Is like, how do you even do that? Like, you have millions of people holding the token. Some hold like $1 worth of tokens, and some hold millions or maybe even billions worth of the token. How do these organizations decide? Right? It can't be one token, one vote. It's super plutocratic. Then you have these like 5, 10 big whales coming in and basically setting the direction. And what you would want is something that is super inclusionary, that really also allows people that just hold a little bit of the token to at least, be heard and included and really not have a say, but I think like being heard is super important, and that's something that is not happening, and there's actually a very big weak point in a lot of these voting methods, is that you get what's called like wasted votes, right? Like if you think about the US, which I think is such an amazing example here, all of the past elections have been super close. You have like 50.1% for one and 49.9% for the other option. And then one party wins. And this is why it's so divisive, because these 49.9% of voters get completely discarded, and the 50.1%, right, are now like able to set the direction. And I think that's extremely wasteful. And actually, this has been known for centuries. And I think DAOs have actually like a moral obligation to find ways to mitigate these dynamics. And here's like what's so amazing about DAOs. Like there's been lots of experiments about this in academia, but like how do these experiments really look? It's like some guy, let's say a professor, and everybody comes together for like one term, and then they run this experiment, and maybe everybody like pitches in 100, which is like I think already like super high end in academia. Then again, worst case, somebody loses $100. I think for most people who can afford a university education, this isn't really life-changing. But in DAOs, you have actual livelihoods on the line. You have people investing millions, like their entire life savings into a project. So and in a very adversarial environment. So it's a very different kind of experiment than you can run in academia. And this is, I think, is something that I think is super important, and why DAOs have this amazing chance to battle test new organizational primitives in a way that I think has never before been possible. So
Yeah.
super bullish DAOs.
I was going to say, you wrote something about these organizational structures that you're thinking about. It was about a hypothetical circles-based DAO.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about that? Something about, is it sub-DAOs, sort of structures with working groups that are decentralized?
Thanks. Good question. Without getting too technically, like basically like one of the big pain points for DAOs and a big sentiment on crypto Twitter has been, decentralized organizations are so inefficient. And I would agree, like if everybody votes on everything, then you have a lot of noise, a lot of chatter, a lot of divisiveness, and decisions take a very long time. And now like the pendulum kind of swings back, and people are saying, okay, decentralized organizations are inefficient, so we need to get super centralized again. We need to have like a CEO and it decides and blah, blah, blah. This is super efficient. Now, if you look at like traditional organizations, then there has been a big push towards like more agile organizations and a lot more decision-making power on the edges, because people have actually found out that centralized organizations aren't that efficient either. Because if all the information has to travel to the CEO, who's super resource-strapped in terms of time and bandwidth, and then has to travel back to the edges, it takes a very long time, and a lot of information gets lost along the way. So traditional organizations, and even in manufacturing and these other like high volume, high stakes organizations have begun to decentralize decision-making process where the guy who is actually doing the work can decide a lot, right? And one of the systems to implement such a thing is like two of the systems that implement these kind of decentralization processes are holacracy and sociocracy. These are like the organizational primitive. These are so-called circles-based organizations that instead of thinking about people doing jobs, you think about roles. Like for instance, Hanson now has the role podcast host, and Catherine has the role moderator, and Rafael has the role guests. And we can think about how these roles relate, and each of us has multiple roles, right? Like I'm also have the role governance lead at StableLab. And in holacracy and sociocracy, these roles have complete autonomy over what they do. Like there's a marketing circle, and the marketing circle decides on marketing, period. If the CEO of an organization doesn't like what the marketing circle does, then they can, of course, replace the circle lead, change the organization, but they cannot say, oh, you did a Twitter campaign, but I wanted you to do a YouTube campaign. And then the marketing guy can just say, I'm sorry, I think Twitter is better, right? And I'm going to go with that. And these organizations tend to be both extremely decentralized and very efficient. Like one of the best examples, for instance, is Medium, the publishing company. And they used holacracy to scale from a very small team to 1,500. And after 1,500, they found out that now they need to kind of change the system around because the very pure application of holacracy didn't scale to an organization of that size, but sub-organizations are still doing that. And I think DAOs can implement that in a way that uses on-chain tools that are available now and that allow people to implement a structure without coding a single line of code and without doing an audit. Because Aragon recently published OSX, which is a modular framework that uses gauge voting, and HEADS protocol has a permissioning protocol where you can basically set up these circles with a click and drag interface, no coding required. And I'm like actually currently talking to one DAO and looking for other DAOs who would be willing to try that, either on a smaller scale, because I think DAOs can really have their cake and eat it too. They can be very decentralized and very efficient at the same time. They just have to get rid of this really, really naive notion that everybody voting on everything is a good idea.
That's very interesting. It's like you're splitting up. You're creating a roles-based organization, like kind of what we did at Access, right? And so with all the working groups, like we empower members. And so maybe you want to share a little bit more about how we're launching our working groups.
No,
Within,
you I
Because he's
think you
the
actually
Access
would know more,
chairman.
but I can talk about it. Yeah, so I've always at the beginning when we set up the association, obviously I was more hands-on, getting things done, getting the interests aligned so that members, because they're not paid, or people that want to help, I need to align with their interests. Because if I don't align with the interests of them and the association, they are not going to help. Just like what incentive, right? Since I can't, the association doesn't have like money to pay, right? And then it reached a point where I would call it semi-network effect, where Access has the name. People would like to grow the Access as the association to the point where some people want to do innovation, then we empower them to do it, yet at the same time still align the right interests. Some people want to do regulation, not only just passively answering regulators, but actively going to them, telling them of the new ideas. And then we have one for digital assets and so on. Digital asset management, like sort of like funds management. And then they also have an agenda at the same time. So it has reached the point where they incentivize to use the brand name of Access, but yet at the same time, they can't just do it through their companies, because if you talk to regulators, they might think that it's too, you're doing it for your self-interest. But if you go through the association, you are doing it for everyone. At least you do it through association. That's what they think. Yeah, so that's the gist of it, where somehow we've been able to motivate people to do what they need to do, but at the same time, the association would ask them to give us updates, where you're at, what's your objective, and we made a goal at the association, made a rule at the association that if they want to push, they can't reach the objective, we can't give the resources, they will still need to disband it, because we are also non-profit. We don't have all the resources to manage. So that's the gist of it. Yeah.
So it's a very interesting experiment. Yeah, I was going to say it's a very interesting experiment we're doing in a Web2 context, and we're trying to move it into a Web3 with Web3 tooling and into a more Web3 deployment, because we're the only nonprofit association in Singapore that has a crypto treasury, like a legit like community treasury. We receive membership dues in crypto. Back when Anson started it, and over the past 10 years, I mean, yeah, so the bags have grown. So it's just about, okay, how do we actually implement new ideas around managing a crypto treasury for like a Web2 kind of association that's championing Web3 initiatives. Yeah, because we have a proper like constitution, we have a board, we have,
We
yeah,
started
and
earlier than
because
Michael Saylor, okay, 2014.
just, yeah, yeah. So I find myself as a board member in Access, volunteering for the past 7 years or so with this association, like straddling two different worlds that are kind of converging at the same time. It's very interesting. It's not been done before, at least in a Singapore context. So what I did was just basically say, hey, I think we should branch out and launch a working group and call for members who might be interested in participating, because we really need new contributors to help out. Yeah, so that's kind of the direction we're going in. It kind of reminded me of your circles-based organization method, except that we still have to answer to a board, so it just go back up. So it's quite holocratic in that aspect.
Yeah, totally. I think that's fine. Like I think sociocracy is like much in some ways more decentralized than holacracy, which is like still has this kind of concept of leadership. But I think like what I really like about this, and that's probably interesting for you, is like really getting clarity on, hey, what kind of roles do we have? Do we need like, and really stop thinking about the organization as an organization of people as opposed to an organization of roles. Because I think this kind of already shifts the perspective to a much more holistic kind of systems kind of view, right? And this, I think, allows people to fine tune much more how the organization is run and organized, and then at the same time having the ability of people to hold multiple roles also allows a lot more fluidity. Like for instance, let's say you are now treasury secretary, like whatever, right? Then maybe like after like a year or two, you're like, ooh, this is really getting boring. Like, so maybe somebody else is interested and then just fills this role. And since like you don't have to worry about your role in the organization, then you become like marketing. You fill the marketing role. And so this allows much more fluidity and cross-pollination in the organization. And I think in the long run, this is like one of the really strong suits of these types of orgs, because they tend to retain contributors or employees for much longer, because it just allows people to move around the organization in a very different way.
Yeah, to help them grow in their learning and development. Sure. I was going to say, we were talking a little bit about Web3 tooling and how L2Beat had their own product and their rating system, for example. And just curious, how do you see StableLab growing in the tooling area? You mentioned it was Force. Do you want to share a little bit more about how it enables data analytics for DAOs? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely our biggest area of growth in some ways. Like the services business is great and will always exist, and we try to grow that as well. But it's basically like any services or consulting business, I think it's basically scaling with humans, right? Like you just need to, when you have more customers, you hire more people and so on and so forth. And I think this can also be done at quite amazing scale. If you look at like the big consulting companies, right, then you can see that even like a business model like that can scale quite well. But I think like Force is something very unique because there's lots of data analytics platforms out there. I think where we are specialists that we have this background in governance. We've done lots of like grants and incentive design and managed incentive programs. And having this kind of background allows us to, because I think data is one thing and like creating information out of the data is another thing. And this is where I think we excel because we can use the data that we can get and then really extract a kind of knowledge of information out of the data that I think is very hard to replicate for other teams who don't have the same context. And so we've worked with Uniswap now, we've worked with MakerDAO, we've worked with Arbitrum, and help them to really understand what parts of their grants or incentive programs actually delivered on what they set out to do. Like what kind of users did they attract? How long did users stay? Like after the grant program was done, what's the cost of like one user, right? And that can be sometimes quite sobering. Like I think especially in the early days of grants programs, like for instance, Uniswap's grants program that they, or like incentive program that they launched to fend off the sushi swap or vampire attack back in the days. Like after the grant program, after the incentive program stopped, most of the users just went away immediately. And in the end, they had to pay $7,000 worth of uni for a single liquidity position.
Wow.
On average. And this is like, if you think about it from an ROI perspective, right? And I always say like, crypto is kind of an e-commerce business, right? You sell digital goods. So e-commerce is very simple in some ways. You have to have like, what's my customer acquisition cost? And what's the lifetime value of the customer, right? So if you think about customer acquisition cost, 7,000, how much in fees would an LP have to, like, you now have to have like 7,000 just to break even? And like, how many LPs generate 7,000 in fees? Like, maybe there's like a handful in all of Uniswap. So, yeah,
For the
I think,
Piranhas
yeah.
that they acquired.
I mean, this was like super early days, and they were in this like existential situation where basically all the funds were moving to Sushi Swap, so they had to do something. Like, I'm not knocking the team; I think they're a great team, and also like by now they've professionalized and progressed. But as you can see, like getting very clear on how much you're actually paying for a customer, I think is super valuable.
Yeah, like having these voter profiles like properly dashboarded so you
Yeah.
can monitor them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's basically the product is you get the dashboard with all the different charts like that are relevant for what you're asking. And then we provide like also a description of what this actually means in your context. And I think this is the important part because the charts like are good. And I think we have high quality sources and really do a good job there. But you can probably get like a Dune analyst or a Flipside guy to provide the same kind of charts. I think like what kind of charts that are, or how we combine them and what that means, I think this is where we are pretty unique.
Yeah, the contextualization. I just realized we're at time. Sorry, we're
Okay.
8 minutes over 4. Yeah, Anson,
Yeah, we
you.
started a little late, but yeah,
No,
thanks.
yeah.
Super
Thank you so
interesting
much
conversation.
for Rafael for coming. I mean, as I tell Kat every single DAO governance radio that I work with her, if I understand more than 30%, which I'm actually increasing in the amounts, I've already achieved my job. I've been in this space for so long, but as you can see that there's so many sub ecosystems of the whole crypto space, right? And every single talk that we learn, I hope us and even the viewers can um, take away something from this. So I guess I just want to let you know the viewership on TikTok. There's actually over 150 of them watching come and go. We had over 36 on X. YouTube, to say the truth, I'm actually just building, so there's not many there. But I need the video there to record.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So so now at the end segment, we actually have a lot of people from the US, obviously, and Singapore. From a DAO perspective, from your expertise, what is the imparting message for these guys that want to learn more about DAOs?
I think that there's so many DAOs and so many different DAOs that I think the best thing if you want to learn about DAOs is to find a DAO that you care about and actually spend some time there. I think every DAO is different, and in some ways they are very similar, but I think at least I learn the most when I really care about something, right? And then it's not as academic, but it's very relevant and very specific in a way. Like this, at least for me, is where I learn the most. And so finding one or two DAOs that you really care about, like some projects that you're passionate about that you think is great, doesn't have to be a huge project. Like there's so many, like you can do DeFi, DePIN, right? Like DeSci even, right? Like so many different DAOs. And just like integrating in the community, seeing how decisions are made, voting, this will already give you a much better understanding than reading like 10 academic papers, because you would then actually know what you're talking about. And I think this is the way to do it. This is the way I did it, and I can highly recommend it.
Great. Get your feet wet, basically. Whatever it is, just get into telegrams, just look at the messages. If you don't understand, and either type it in or get someone to help you. Yeah, you're right. Getting your feet wet is most important.
Yeah.
Kat, any other last? Yeah, sorry, go on.
Sorry, yeah, exactly. Like ask questions, because this is also like how you get to know other community members, and then you'll find, I think in some ways it's very rewarding because these are communities, right? And then you'll find other people who you like to just like spend time with, and then you'll have some online friends. And I think this is like even better, right?
I was going to say that's so true, because I got connected to a governance community because I attended DEF CON last year. So they actually had a governance geeks hub. So you can go there every day, and there'll be someone facilitating sessions around interesting DAO topics. Yeah, so I just went almost every day just to listen to the talks and contribute. And that's how we kept in touch in Telegram over there. And that's how I got connected with Rafael, because he was in the same group as well. So yeah, it really works. Like just
amazing.
Great. So thank you, Rafael, and thanks, Kat, for another episode of the DeFi Governance Radio. We will have the DeFi Governance Radio every month, and I'm sure Kat will have another awesome guest next month. What happens after this is that I will be doing a condensed video of this. We can share with people that you think may be interested more in the DAOs. It will be 10 minutes long, and then different shorts. I will be mentioning you guys on X, on LinkedIn, and so on. So